Good morning. I hope that everyone's having a great day so far, and I appreciate everyone's time for sitting on this webinar. I'm Hideyuki Terashima, and I'm an environmental geologist with the Illinois State Water Survey, located at the University of Illinois. I've been part of the wateroperator.org program since 2014 and currently oversee the day-to-day, which involves making sure that the most up-to-date information and resources are showcased within our website, and occasionally hosting these webinars sharing relevant and useful information to operators and utilities. During this presentation today, I'll be introducing to you what the wateroperator.org program is, how it's a useful program that aims to help water and wastewater professionals around the country to help them maintain compliance and enhance public health, while focusing on today's topic, which is going to be on monitoring, sampling, and data management or reporting for NPDES compliance. Before I start, I wanted to quickly go over some housekeeping stuff. This webinar will be presented on the GoToWebinar platform. For those that have not used GoToWebinar before, you should see a console similar to what I have shown on the slide. There is a question section. It should look like a text box with a question mark on it. But if you press on the icon, you should be able to see a enter your question text box section where you should be able to submit a question through the GoToWebinar platform. And we will review these questions at the end. So during the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to throw your question in there. We should have a moderator reviewing those questions. The webinar will also be recorded and will be uploaded to our wateroperator.org YouTube channel once the webinar is over. If you have registered through GoToWebinar, you should be receiving a notification once that is available. This webinar has been pre-approved to provide 1.5 wastewater hours for Illinois licensed operators. But for those of you from other states, we'll be more than happy to offer you a certificate of attendance or help you complete any kind of forms or documents that are required by your certification body to help you receive credits. We did also submit approval with Indiana, but we are still waiting to hear back whether this webinar is going to be approved or not. But I believe they can approve events later on for credit approval. So if we receive updates and you're an Indian operator, just reach out to us and we should be able to update you whether you'll be able to receive credits for this or not. I believe the webinar registration form also asks whether you'll be requiring a certificate or not. But if you are interested and didn't indicate so during registration, please send us an email at info@wateroperator.org requesting a certificate of attendance with the name of this webinar, something like NPDES monitoring webinar in the email text so that we know which certificate is issued to you. Additionally, we won't be able to provide any certificates after or for watching the recording of this webinar after it's been uploaded to our YouTube channel. So please keep that in mind. And I will be referencing a lot of links throughout this webinar. So if you'd like a copy of the slides, which would have all those links listed, please don't hesitate to email us and requesting a copy, and I'll be happy to send it to you after the webinar is over. So this will be the outline for today's presentation. I'll start off by introducing to you what kind of website wateroperator.org is and outline the types of resource or information that operators or anyone that access our websites can find through the tools that we offer that can help you further your knowledge on water and wastewater management and to help you improve your compliance. I've given similar presentations in the past, but we've always focused on a specific topic or area of wastewater compliance. And today, again, our focus is going to be on NPDES compliance, specifically on the sampling and reporting side. And we'll be highlighting the unique compliance challenges a lot of operators usually face when they're collecting wastewater samples or issues with whenever they're reporting that data to your regulatory agency or body. We'll begin with a quick review of what NPDES discharge permits are and some of the more common compliance challenges that are reported, or usually the violations that are usually recorded by EPA. Things like being able to meet effluent limits. There's a lot of reporting violations that EPA usually have received. There's also some utilities can also have sampling errors. There could be mistakes with laboratory calculations and just much more. So we'll be covering all of that. These are, again, issues that are often reported by wastewater systems. So it's important to ensure that all systems are following proper sampling and reporting protocols to avoid those non-compliance issues. From there, we'll look at some of the best practices to help you ensure standard operating procedures, meet NPDES compliance, and then I'll highlight some public available tools and resources, documents, guides, manuals that are designed to, again, educate operators, guide operators with proper procedures for, again, sampling and reporting. Then we'll review how you can find similar resources through our website, waterarbor.org, so that you can explore what other types of resources might be available that are out there. I'll then wrap up by introducing the other features on our website, like our newsletters, blog posts, our self-paced classes that offer CUs, which might be interesting to some of you, some of the operators out here that are looking for more credits. By the end of the session, you'll know what kind of sampling and reporting focused compliance tools and resources are, again, readily available to operators. So, starting off, what exactly is waterarbor.org? It is a website that we developed at the University of Illinois in collaboration with the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, or RCAP, with funding from US EPA. It basically serves as a clearinghouse of publicly available resources to help water and wastewater system and operators with a focus on small systems. But basically, we have a team of staff that scour the internet to find and collect various publicly available information and resources that are useful for operators, and we provide a means to search and access that information easier through our website. So rather than having to sift through pages of search results on Google, we basically made a platform to search for water and wastewater focused resources easier to save you time. And also, if you're Googling something like wastewater treatment manual or sampling manual, sometimes you might find results from guides developed by bigger organizations like WEF or AWWA. Well, a lot of times those resources cost money. Sometimes you might even require membership to be able to access a certain resource. All the information that we collect are all publicly accessible information that anyone can be able to access. Additionally, if operators do have trouble finding certain information, they can always call us or email us, and we will try to help them find that specific information. Or if they have a really technical question, we'll try to connect you with some of our RCAP partners, TAPs, that technical assistance providers that can help or assist you with some of those questions you might have. So how do we find these resources, and what exactly do we look for? We basically have a database of over 800 organizations, such as national organizations like APA, AWWA, WEF, as well as individual state agencies, regional associations, and even vendors. Each of our staff essentially visits their websites and looks for information on events like operator trainings, webinars, conferences, pretty much any event that offers CUs for operators. We try to catalog those information. Even if they don't offer credits, if an event is free and useful for operators, like a lot of EPA webinars, we will collect the information as well and try to share it within our partners as well as our audience. We also look for publicly available resources such as fact sheets, reports, manuals, past conference presentations, any kind of technical documentation or resource that can be helpful for operators, especially small system operators. We'll try to focus on collecting those and featuring those on our website. We have been doing this since 2009, and we currently have a resource library of over 15,000 documents, and we catalog around 11 to 12,000 training events every year. So if you're really looking for a lot of these training information, free document resources, fact sheets, manuals, our website's the go-to location to find all that publicly accessible information. The website was actually first called smallwatersupply.org, but we actually rebranded to waterarbor.org around 2016. So we have been doing this for a while. We do have a decent amount of presence within a lot of the groups, water and wastewater groups out there. A lot of state agencies list us as a resource. EPA lists us as a resource. State of Washington, they actually stopped managing their own training calendar, and they actually send all their operators to our website to find for training information. So you can find a lot of great information through our website. So after we collect all of this information on training events and documents, we display that information through our nationwide event calendar tool and our library tool that's located in our website. So our calendar tool, again, it's meant to help operators save time from having to search through different organizations, training providers' websites, and find all the relevant training events on a single calendar. And same for our documents library. Rather than having to Google for certain topics, it's going to certain organizations' websites, like state agencies' websites, to find information information, you can search for all that public accessible resources through our document library tool. And for each entry of events or documents that you can find, we also try to give you as much information as you want, as you might need. So for training events, we'll make sure to highlight where you can register, what you're going to learn from attending a class, how many CUs is offered. Sorry about that. How many CUs is offered, uh, and contact information, which states the class is approved in, and just a lot of information. And for each document that we catalog, we also try to highlight how it's a useful resource for operators, what you'll learn from reading it, where we found this document, and links to where the web page we found it. So if you're looking for similar uh, resources, you might be able to find it through their web page. We try not to host anything ourselves. We're just basically linking you back to the organization that is hosting all this information. So we're I like to call ourselves the Google of water and wastewater related information, but um, again, we're not trying to take credit. We're just trying to link you to all these great resources that are out there from all these organizations. In the past, we've heard from a lot of operators that they found the calendar tool to be an excellent tool to find events that they never knew existed. We do try to catalog events from organizations that have less of an internet presence, maybe those regional associations that send event information through email. We try to get signed up on those lists as well and try to feature it in our calendar. And we've had a lot of we've had operators email us, call us saying like, hey, I need to get X number of credits by the end of the month. Can you help me find some classes? And we'll try to help them as well. So we've even had vendors reach out to us saying like, hey, can you list their documentation or some of our upcoming webinars? And we'll make sure that the document is useful for operators, doesn't have a lot of advertisement, and for events like those, we make sure that they're actually pre-approved to offer CUs, or it has to be free and useful. So we do that level of vetting as well to make sure that all the information you can find is, again, relevant and useful for operators out there. And as I mentioned earlier, we do deal with a wide range of topics, and every resource we do add is tagged with a specific category, which gets integrated into our search engine. Here is a list of the categories or filters that is currently that is static and that anyone can use to search for information on these topics. And all these categories are linked to the training events or the documents we add. So if you're trying to filter out specific O&M focused documents or events, you can do that using these categories. And this pie chart, it is a breakdown of all the um, or breakdown of the categories covered by the roughly 12,000 events that we added during 2024. So as you can see, a lot of these training events that we find are focused on O&M, certification exam prep, water wastewater treatment. But I do want to mention that we do have categories for monitoring, wastewater discharge effluent, that's really much more closely related to NPDES permits, biosolids, or if have a biosolid land application program, you might want to, if you're looking for biosolid information, we do have that category as well. I do also want to mention that there are a lot of free training opportunities out there, like webinars from EPA, EFCN, that are informative and might not offer credits, but they do have a lot of webinars that cover topics to help water or wastewater systems get back to compliance. So I do always recommend keeping an eye out for those. But again, how to use our website, how to use these categories to search for those events and documents, I will give a demo of this in the second half of this webinar. So during this presentation, I'll be highlighting a variety of publicly available resources or accessible resources designed to help wastewater systems address those common NPDES compliance challenges or issues that are, again, more focused on the monitoring and reporting side, um, and resources that would help your day-to-day operations in those areas. A lot of these documents resources do focus on practical hands-on approaches, like developing a sampling plan that follows proper procedures, proper ways of collecting routine samples, how to analyze samples using the EPA-approved methods that are compliant, and how to accurately report those data through your NetDMR or your regulatory agency. So we will review a mix of resource types, including guides, videos, webinar recordings, best practice manuals, smaller fact sheets, and even reports developed by experts in the field. We'll also look at how to search again for those information using our website that can help you, like training events that'll help you maintain your license, as well as resources again that'll help you outline those best practices. a lot of these materials do come from that I've highlighted do come from trusted and credible organizations. So um, again, many of these resources, since they're focused on the NPDES permits, does come from EPA, which manages that program. A lot of the state agencies do develop resources for their operators as well, focused on sampling and reporting. So a lot of the resources covered again today will come from state agencies, um, as well as a regional organization or more national organizations like EFCN, or wastewater focused organizations like WEAs, as well as those individual state training providers. So hopefully I'll be covering a decent amount of good, reliable, or useful resources. All right. So the reason I wanted to highlight sampling, monitoring, or reporting, or focus on that as today's topic is, we are seeing more cases like examples on the slides where compliance issues, or actually, it's not. So we're not seeing this more recently, but we've been seeing it for a while, but we're seeing it a lot more because of the internet, being able to share all these news information easier. But we do see a lot of compliance news articles about compliance issues that aren't just tied to treatment performance, but related to how data is collected, handled, and reported. We're currently hearing stories about wastewater discharges happening around the country because of aging infrastructure. Like most recently, there was a big one in San Diego that was impacting a lot of the residents there in the South Bay area. But it's not just spills that are compliance issues. In some cases, a lot of systems are getting violations or legal action because of inaccurate monitoring data, because they sample incorrectly, or because they reported incorrectly on their DMR. Not necessarily because of treatment performance, but because they just failed with this managerial aspect of managing your permit. So it is very important to keep track of making sure that you're following those right procedures. We're also seeing news articles about incorrect or falsified reporting, which has resulted in enforcement actions, fines, or even criminal penalties. So these cases do highlight that sampling and reporting, again, isn't just a routine task, but it is essential for compliance and making sure that you're not getting legally enforced because you're doing stuff incorrectly. So the goal of this presentation, again, is to show that there are practical tools, guidance, and training resources out there that can help operators avoid these issues, and make sure that they're following right procedures, and again, maintaining accuracy when they're reporting. But these steps, again, if you're proper steps, should lead to improved sampling and reporting practices, which again can help systems catch issues like process updates, make sure their sampling is equipment is working properly, and again, the data they're collecting and reporting is um, doesn't lead to permit violations because they're incorrect. Right. So before we get into the NPDES permits and compliance side, I do want to give a minute to briefly cover the Clean Water Act, since it's really the foundation of everything that we're going to be talking today. So the Clean Water Act, it was passed in 1972. The main purpose is again to regulate discharges of pollutants into the U.S. waterways. The overall goal is again to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of our nation's waters, or that's how EPA defines it. One of the most important parts of this act is that it does make it. They did make it illegal to for people or for entities to discharge pollutants from a point source into waterways without a permit, and that's where the NPDES program comes in. Pollutant discharges by permittees usually include, municipal wastewater systems, industrial discharges, stormwater, or even some types of agricultural waste like pesticides and concentrated animal feeding operations. But again, we'll be focusing on the municipal wastewater side of that today. And a point source is basically, again, any identifiable discharge location. For example, for a treatment plant, that'll be the outfall pipe. It could be a ditch or it could be a channel. That's something that you can clearly trace. And when we refer to waters of the United States, we're generally talking about navigable waters, tributaries, or certain surface water sources. It's important to note that groundwater usually isn't regulated usually regulated separately by a state, although there are some exceptions if that groundwater source does connect to a source water source. So the Clean Water Act, it essentially establishes the rules that if you're discharging from a defined source or a point source into surface water, you do need a permit for that. And the NPDES permit program is really how those requirements are put into practice. So NPDES permits are essentially a form of legal authorization. They allow those facilities to discharge pollutants into the waters, but only under clearly defined limits and conditions. So these permits are usually established under Section 4, or are established under Section 4.2 of the Clean Water Act. And one of their key roles is to take broader water quality standards and translate them into specific measurable effluent limits that all these facilities have to meet. Another important requirement is that facilities do have to conduct routine monitoring and routine self-monitoring, which means that operators are responsible for collecting their own samples, analyzing those results, and reporting that data to show that they're staying compliant with those permit limits set. That's where sampling and reporting becomes very critical making sure that you're actually following the right procedures. In terms of how the program is implemented, EPA generally sets the overall regulations and those national standards, but in most cases, individual states are authorized to run their own NPDES program, which means that state agencies are typically responsible for issuing those permits, reviewing DMRs, and conducting inspections or routine inspections to make sure that proper sampling and monitoring practices are implemented at the wastewater system. EPA does still provide oversight, and they can step in for enforcement if needed. But if you're interested in learning more about how your state does it, the map on the right, or how other states does it, the map on the right of the slide shows a breakdown of which are fully authorized, which states have fully authorized NPDES programs, which are unauthorized, which are partially authorized, where you might have a mixture between EPA and the state agency handling that stuff. Um, and another thing to keep in mind is that permits aren't permanent. They're typically issued in a 5-year cycle. So facilities do have to regularly renew them, update them based on changing regulations, depending on if you have changes to your wastewater system, or if there are specific water quality requirements that change over time, where you need to upgrade your permit or update your permit. So overall, NPDES permits are what connect the regulatory standards to your day-to-day operations, and they're the reason why accurate sampling, again, monitoring and reporting are a crucial part of compliance with permits. So to understand what drives all these monitoring and reporting requirements, it helps to look at the key federal regulations behind the permit program. So you'll often hear references to different parts of the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR, and each of one of these covers a specific part of that, or piece of that compliance. So Part 122 focuses on the overall permitting requirements. It defines the monitoring and reporting requirements, and what counts as a violation. Part 136 is especially important for labs and operators because that covers the approved analytical methods that ensures samples are analyzed correctly by EPA approved methods, and that results are legally defensible because of that. Part 133 sets the national effluent limits for publicly owned treatment works. This is where you see those common parameters like BOD, TSS, pH, which form that baseline limits many facilities have to meet. And if a system is an industrial user, um, or if a system manages waste from industrial users or has an industrial treatment program, then Part 403 comes into play, and that requires additional sampling and monitoring to make sure that industrial discharges into your system aren't going to have an impact or will result in a violation if it passes through into your effluent. And then Part 503 applies if your facility generates biosolids and disposes those for uses like land application or landfill applications, which then introduces additional monitoring requirements to ensure metals or pathogens aren't in those biosolids aren't going to be contaminating the surrounding area. So all these requirements should be included in your facility's specific permit, and they can be stricter compared to the baseline federal limits, depending on how sensitive the U.S. waterways is. But nothing is ever going to be more lenient than the national standards. So now that we've covered the regulatory framework, let's look closely at what a permit actually requires from a facility. So at a basic level, a permit will include those specific effluent limits that your system has to meet, which are based on the secondary treatment standards under Part 133. So for example, you'll typically see limits for biochemical oxygen demand and total suspended solids, where the 30-day average has to be 30 milligrams per liter or less, and the 7-day average can't exceed 45 milligrams per liter. most plants are required to meet at least 85% removal efficiency for both of those as well. You'll also see pH limits, which generally requires discharged wastewater to stay within the range of about 6 to 9 standard units. But again, your permit should list all that information. And all these permits, or all these limits, they're derived from technology-based effluent limits, or TBELs, which are based on what a typical treatment process should be able to achieve. So conventional mechanical plants are expected to meet those standard limits, but alternative systems like lagoons or trickling filters, they could have more lenient limits set by EPA, since they do rely on algae for treatment, and presence of that effluent can increase the TSS readings that could result in violations if they're following the standard mechanical plant limits. Permits can also include stricter water quality based limits, which are based on the conditions of the receiving waters. So if the receiving stream is small, impaired, or environmentally sensitive, like in the Chesapeake Bay area for the Northeast, or other sensitive water bodies around the country, then your permit might require stricter limits for discharge as well as additional monitoring requirements. For example, some systems may need to monitor nutrients like ammonia, nitrogen, or phosphorus seasonally, which could impact the local waterways if those are elevated in the discharge. So effluent cisterns are ultimately used to determine those additional requirements like sampling, monitoring, reporting, and those are the specific compliance actions your permit will lay out in detail. So let's look closer at what compliance requirements you can find on your permits. So first, it outlines what you need to sample. That includes the specific parameters that you have to sample for, like BOD, pH, ammonia, or other nutrients, or that your permit will require. It also tells you where your sampling location should be. There should be a monitoring location or ID, or monitoring location identifiers, MLIDs, and usually includes which usually includes your influent, some key process areas within your plant, as well as your final effluent outfall. It also mentions how often you need to sample. Your permit sets the required schedule for each parameter. This could be continuous monitoring, daily grab samples, weekly composites, or again, seasonal monitoring for stuff like nutrients or metals. And finally, it also outlines how you report your results, and which a lot of times all these monitoring data has to be submitted electronically through your NetDMR portals, either through EPA's website or your state agency's website. And it has to be accurate and on time, even during months when there's no discharge involved, which might be common for for systems like lagoons. So if you're ever unsure about these requirements, your permit should always be your first reference. It's also important that all staff are familiar with these requirements, since they can help identify potential issues like problems with sampling equipment or procedures beforehand, before sampling has to be done, because if your equipment isn't running properly, that could lead to violations or compliance issues. So now that we talked about what permits require, let's take a closer look at where systems tend to struggle with compliance. So EPA has published and come up. These are kind of the data that EPA does look for, and they do publish the violation data. Um, and they have actually started this initiative called the Initiative to Reduce Significant Non-Compliance with NPDES Permits. So if you click on that website, they actually have this great graph out on their website, which outlines the types of violations that has been reported between 2019 and 2023. And they focus on three types of violations: reporting violations, which could be DMR errors, not following your scheduled timeline, or missing to submit a DMR, data entry efforts like not following the correct rounding or correct significant digits issue, or certification issues. They also track effluent violations, so these could be process upsets, anything issues that can lead to exceeding permit limits, not disinfecting properly, having pre-treatment or initial pre-treatment waste bypass and going into your effluent, and much more. And even sample collection and laboratory practices, if they're not done correctly, that can also lead to effluent violations, because then your effluent is going to be significantly higher if, again, your sample is not good, or your analysis process is incorrect. And there's also compliance schedule violations, which, if you're required to submit additional reports like toxic surveys, or surveys to conduct whether there's sensitive water bodies around or other kind of reports like that. That could lead to a violation, or if you don't start construction projects as required in your permit, that can lead to those scheduled violations. And as you can see in this graph, back in 2019, there's been a lot more reporting violations were a lot more common compared to the other two, but it has been significantly decreasing over the past few years. But there are still a relatively large number of reported violation um, or reporting violations. So that's why I kind of wanted to focus on that as the topic today. And I do want to mention that there are NPDES compliant sampling inspections that are routine inspections required to for every system to identify issues with sampling and reporting practices. Again, to make sure that you're compliant during those inspections, hopefully the information covered today will help you for that. So I think the first step to staying in compliance is to really understand what your system requirements are and your current compliance status. So again, your first resource should be your permit. To find your permit, the best place to start is your state environmental agency's website. That's your primary source for your actual permit, which usually again highlights your effluent limits and your required parameters to sampling location, and all that. And in most cases, your state agency, like Illinois EPA for Illinois operators or Indiana DEM for Indiana operators, they're responsible for administering your permits. So their website usually will have the most up-to-date information. I've included links on the bottom to both agencies' databases where you can search for NPDES permits. But if you're from a different state, again, check with your state agency. They should have some sort of portal, or they should be able to help you find the information you're looking for. Or if if your state doesn't have an NPDES program, check to see with EPA if they have your permit. Once you know your permit requirements, the next step is to understand your compliance status, which means checking for any or current past violations, as well as reviewing your DMR, past DMRs to better understand your system performance over time. And you can find all the information using EPA's enforcement and compliance history online system, or their ECHO portal, search portal. So this is a public searchable database where you can look up your facility and review your compliance history, violations, as well as your reported DMR data. So for example, I have the Champaign Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District. That's the wastewater treatment plant that treats University of Illinois wastewater. This is what their facility report looks like on the ECHO database. But if you look on the right side, you'll see the menu or different sections of the report itself. If you go to the enforcement and compliance section, it should tell you what your current violations are, if there are any, if there aren't any. It looks like there was a violation identified in 2024 that's related to the Clean Water Act, but there's no other violations related to the RCRA. So again, if you're looking for the information, this Echo should be able to show you all the information. And if you scroll to the bottom, you should be able to find your past DMR as well. So if you're curious about your facility, definitely check your facility information out on Echo, and you should be able to find all the information. And usually you can search by your address, but geographically, or if you have your NPDES permit ID or facility ID, you can easily search for your facility information through that as well. So once you've located your permit, the next step is actually, again, reading it, knowing what your specific requirements are. And again, I added a screenshot of what the Urbana Champaign Sanitary District permit looks like. It's a little bit smaller, so it's hard to tell, but as you can clearly tell in the first few pages, there is a huge table that shows you these are what your parameters are that you have to monitor for, um, whether it's load based or concentration based, how often you have to sample, as well as the sample type that you have to collect, and the effluent limits, whether it's monthly or daily average or maximum or average that you have to meet. It should also list your sampling location, as you can tell in the second screenshot or second image, where it has the discharge location number. Sometimes it'll contain coordinates to it, GPS coordinates, as well as a map that can help locate those specific outfalls. And you might also have special conditions listed on your permit, um, stuff that mandates specific requirements. Like for this one, it says that the supervisor or superintendent has to be a Class 1 certified operator. Um, or if you have industrial pre-treatment programs, it'll list those monitoring and sampling requirements. And if you have future nutrient compliance deadlines, all that information will be listed on there as well. So it's a good idea to, again, routinely revisit your permits, read it as a team, make sure everyone knows what those requirements are, so you're following proper procedures. So let's look at more of the actual sampling process. Um, the first thing to understand is the sampling location. Samples must be taken at the exact point defined in your permit, whether that's, again, at the influent, specific process points, or at the final influent outfall. These aren't flexible. You have to monitor or sample from these locations for compliance purposes. In many systems, that final sampling point might be located after disinfection, like in a channel or basin, or just after dechlorination. The photo on the top right is a good example of that. Where you see a guy sampling, or the sampling point is inside this channel, and they're collecting it using a grab sample. And it might not be evident, but automatic samples on the shown on the image in the bottom are also usually located around those effluent weirs, pipes, or channels that'll collect those routine automatically collect those routine samples that it's required to collect. Now, once you know where to sample, the next step is understanding how to sample. So there's two main types, either grab or composite samples. So a grab sample is a single sample collected at a specific point in time. They're used for parameters that can change rapidly, like pH or DO, chlorine residuals, and even bacteria. And as shown in the photo, it's often collected by dipping a bottle directly into the flow or using a sampling pole. But it's important to be careful whenever you're sampling stuff like this. You don't want to accidentally collect algae that might be floating on the surface, grease or debris on the side of the wall that can potentially get into your sample as well. That could ruin your, or that might skew your sampling results. So you want to make sure you're collecting it within a nice in the middle of the channel where there's less debris that can fall into your sample. On the other hand, composite samples are made up of multiple smaller samples collected over time, usually over a 24-hour period, which are used for parameters that represent average conditions of your wastewater flow, like BOD, like you want your average BOD throughout the day. Same for TSS, ammonia, and nutrients as well. But the photo on the bottom right shows like an automatic sampler which collects and stores these samples over time. With composites, proper handling is crucial. So samples need to be stored at the correct temperature, and equipment like tubes need to be routinely cleaned to make sure you're avoiding contamination. If we look closer at automatic samplers, which are again commonly used to collect these composite samples at wastewater treatment plants, um, there are several types of automatic samples that are used. The most common are portable or refrigerated units that use peristaltic pumps to pull small volumes of water at set intervals. There are also vacuum-assisted samplers and more advanced flow-paced systems that collect samples based on how much wastewater is moving through the system rather than just time-based. So these flow-paced samplers are especially useful for larger systems where your flow might be changing rapidly, drastically throughout the day, like in the mornings or during the evening. If you have higher flows compared to during the middle of the day, you might want a flow-based. But if you have constant wastewater stream, then you might just need a time-based sampler, as that would be more representative. But I do want to mention, or if you do use a flow-based system, you can either have a sampler that actually collects the flow and measures flows over time, or you might have it might be attached to a flow sensor like an ultrasonic flow meter that's measuring actual flow through a channel and collecting samples depending on how much flow has passed. But I do want to mention the biggest challenge for automatic samplers is the cost. They're pretty expensive. Commercial units can cost several $1,000s, which can be difficult for smaller rural systems to afford. But there are a lot of recently there have been a lot more scientific papers and reports of people building their own low-cost DIY style samplers using readily available components. So I've included links on the bottom of the slide for a few examples, but these systems can cost around $1,000, and they can be easily built by using components like a peristaltic pump, tubing, battery, a microcontroller that's often housed within something as simple as a 10-gallon cooler, as shown on this image. But the top image shows what the cooler housing looks like. The second image below that shows where all that equipment is located and can be stored within the container itself. So there are cheaper solutions out there. I've read other utilities using something like a small refrigerator and having a pump attached to that refrigerator and storing that sample in there. So I've heard a lot of other operators doing something similar. But if this was something that you're interested in, definitely check out those reports on the bottom. And what and especially what makes this type of design especially useful is that it does use weight-based sensors, and you can control how much sample is collecting during each of those cycles. So it can be very flexible, get very small, and it could be super handy to have it, especially if you don't have an automatic sampler. So again, definitely check out these sources. So now that we've gone over sampling methods, so we want the next step is to make sure those samples are collected consistently and correctly, and that's where having a sampling standard operating procedure or SOP can be useful. So before sampling can even begin, there are a few important steps to prepare for sampling. You want to make sure you're using the correct bottles, preservatives. You want to make sure you're labeling everything beforehand, calibrating field equipment during the day you're sampling, like for handheld meters. Having a SOP like that can help ensure all those steps are being followed, and you're being compliant with all those procedures. So during sample collection, you're being consistent is the most important part, and SLB can help you outline what steps to follow, proper steps of wearing proper PPE, collecting at the correct location, in a well mixed location of a channel as opposed to like a side of the wall, making sure that the bottle is facing towards the current to avoid picking up debris from falling into your bottle, and making sure that you're not rinsing the bottle beforehand that might contain preservatives, and that you're only doing that after your cap has been sealed. And after the sample is collected, you want to make sure you're following the correct preservation and documentation. Samples should be placed in a cooler with ice, kept at below 6 degrees Celsius to maintain the sample integrity, but not freezing temperature. You also need to complete a chain of custody form, which tracks, who sampled, which laboratory is analyzing, and all that handoff, and making sure that because that is going to be is legally required and can result in violations if if there's errors in that chain of custody form. And finally, you have to meet the proper holding times, and especially for sensitive parameters like pH, you have to do that within a short window, like 15 minutes. But for other parameters, there might be like a 48-hour holding time or even longer. And SOP can outline all of those steps. So having a great sampling SOP can be super helpful for all your staff. Now that we've collected those samples, the next step is to make sure they're analyzed correctly, and that's where compliance monitoring comes in. Under Part 136, that outlines approved analytical methods that has to be followed when you're testing wastewater samples. So each of these parameters have those specific requirements and holding times, as and those specific standards. And if you click on the link on the bottom, that the Part 136 guidelines, that will send you to EP's page that has all of the different parameters, all the different approved analytic testing methods. But for pH, you have a maximum holding time of 15 minutes. Same with DO. But for pH, you want to use the standard methods 4500H, which using an on-site using a pH meter. For TSS and BOD, or for TSS, you might use the gravimetric method where you have to dry the samples and weigh the samples. But if you have a collected sample, the maximum holding time is 7 days. While for BOD, the maximum holding time is 48 hours. And for E. coli, there's a different method, and that's a nutrients stuff like E. coli and fecal coliform is different because it has a maximum holding time of 6 hours, so it's a little bit more restrictive. You definitely want to get those to a lab as soon as you have that sample collected, or within your SOP, you should have some sort of monitoring sampling schedule where once you're sampled, you can have that shipped to a lab, especially for E. coli within that 6 hour window, or you personally delivering it to a certified laboratory. So making sure that you're following those monitoring requirements is, again, especially crucial for compliance. And once those samples are collected and analyzed, the next step is again to submit that data through your DMR, discharge monitoring reports. From a regulatory standpoint, facilities are required to compile all that monitoring data each month, submitting it electronically through a NetDMR portal, whether run by your state or through EPA's website directly. They're usually required by the 28th day of the following month. And again, even if no discharge happens, like for seasonal systems, you still have to submit a report using a no discharge or NODI code. Now, even though these steps does sound pretty straightforward, one of the most common areas where compliance this is where um, the most common areas where compliance issues does occur. So one common mistake reported is confusing concentration and mass limits. For example, mixing up milligrams per liter with pounds per day whenever you're reporting. Another issue is entering the wrong values into the wrong columns, like putting an average concentration into a loading field. So again, you want to make sure the correct uh, parameters are entered in the correct location. Another commonly reported error is rounding in significant figures, which can actually change whether a result appears to exceed a limit or not. Um, and a big one is how non-detect values are handled. There's a lot of codes, the proper codes that you have to enter for non-detect values. Or sorry, if you don't want to enter zero as instead of if there's a non-detect, instead you want to enter the method's detection limits, as that can lead to incorrect averages or even trigger violations. Also, EPA does recommend rounding to the nearest even number, which some states don't necessarily require. So rounding in significant digits, that's something where you want to make sure that you're following the right procedure, whether it's the EPA method or if your state requires a different method. Some might just tell you to round up. Some, again, might require you to round to the even number. Again, you want to make sure which is the correct way to follow. And to avoid reporting violations, there are a few simple ways to reduce those common errors. If you can set up reminders for sampling and reporting deadlines that can help keep everyone in track. You can use free tools like Google Sheets or Google Docs, even Google Calendar to create simple tracking records, logs, as well as shared calendars that organize sampling schedules, document required parameters and frequency, and record or retain monitoring data in a centralized location that's easily accessible by all your staff. Having something like this is also great for succession planning. There are a lot of free tools out there. You can also use, asset management softwares. Like I know Waterly is a company that's been having a lot more presence throughout Illinois. There are a plethora of options out there. It's a good practice to also have a second person review the data before submitting it through your DMR portal, as mistakes can be caught early. You have two sets of eyes reviewing to make sure that data is entered correctly. And most importantly, understanding how your state expects you to handle those rounding significant digit figures and averaging is, again, crucial to make sure that you're reporting the correct number and you're doing the correct calculations as well. But once a violation or non-compliance event occurs, the next step is to make sure that it's handled and reported correctly under the permit. If a violation could impact public health or environment, it has to be reported within the state or to the state within 24 hours. Once you become aware of it, not once after it happens. Once you become aware of it, this could include things like treatment upsets, unscheduled bypasses, or exceeding daily permit limits. But after initial notice, you do have to give a more detailed report within 5 days of what happened, when it occurred, what caused it, and what actions were taken to prevent it from happening again. And along with that, it's important to make sure you understand the cause of the violation and you have a plan in place for not for that to not happen in the future. If it was an equipment failure, that's simple fix. But if it was a process failure, you might have to do some investigation to figure out why that process failure happened. You also want to rule out sampling and reporting errors by checking things like chain of custody forms, holding times, sample logs whenever these kind of events happen. Because again, that is if there are errors in that will cause a reporting violation as well. And from there, you should document any kind of adjustments you make to correct the problems. Or if you still have an issue, we should reach out. You should try to reach out to like a technical assistant provider or circuit writer to get additional support, as they'll be able to help you fix those, help you return back to compliance. Very quickly, I wanted to touch on part 403 as well. This won't be applicable for every system, but if you have a pre-treatment program, um, your local municipal facility, wastewater system will serve as the local control authority, and they'll, require to make sure that there's no pass-through happening or toxic industrial pollutants from flowing from the industrial site to your wastewater treatment plant and through your outfall. It's also it'll be important to prevent interference as well, making sure to protect your plant's infrastructure, physical equipment as well. A lot of these industrial pollutants can be corrosive and can impact your treatment trained, like your microbes as well as your equipment as well. So you want to prevent that interference from happening, and making sure that if you do produce biosolids, that industrial waste isn't going to be impacting your sludge quality or solids quality. So some best practices, having an enforceable local sewer ordinance can be helpful, as that will help you enforce all those requirements. If you have an enforcement response plan, that can help you outline how violations from industrial users are handled. And if someone unfamiliar with it, they can look at the plan themselves and know what to do if these issues happen. It's also important to maintain an up-to-date inventory of all those industrial users, especially those significant industrial users, and ensure that they're properly permitted and monitored for and sampled. And regular inspections and sampling can also be super helpful. These include periodically visiting those industrial facilities, collecting samples at their discharge sites, and verifying that they're meeting those permit limits. I know some facilities even do a walkthrough of the industrial plant to make sure nothing has changed, no process have changed that could potentially be increasing the pollutant load within their wastewater stream. So it's helpful to identify those potential issues early, those industrial, and have a partner with those industrial facilities to make sure that you routinely have access to their facility as well as being able to sample from their discharge area outfall. I also wanted to touch on Part 503 for biosolids compliance. Um, these regulations, again, focus on making sure biosolids can be safely treated or reused and disposed of uh, while protecting public health. For certain facilities with larger flows, serving larger populations, or classified as a major producing management facility, there's also a requirement to submit annual reports documenting biosolids handling and compliance as well. But from a monitoring standpoint, biosolids have to be routinely tested for a set of regulatory metals like arsenic, cadmium, copper, lead, mercury, and a bunch of other stuff like zinc. But making sure those concentrations stay below allowable limits. And depending on how biosolids are used, facilities also have to meet limits based on concentration or loading rates. But in addition to testing, there are several best management practices for example, making sure you're maintaining a map or a GIS map of all the sites where you have where land application is done, and can help track where all that is being applied, and helps ensure proper setback distances from water bodies or from the local community is set in place to make sure that uh, those pollutants aren't potentially impacting the local groundwater that could potentially be getting into either private wells or again the local sensitive water bodies. Facilities should also keep a detailed record of sampling data, application logs, as well as vector attraction reduction certifications to show that you're actually staying compliant over time. And though individual states can have more stringent requirements for biosolids land application, I would check with your state agency for those specific requirements to make sure you're staying compliant. And as we've seen from a lot of these programs, or as we've seen all this overview so far, maintaining compliance with sampling monitoring reporting can be complex, but there are resources out there to help individual systems. There are a lot of technical assistance programs specifically designed to help wastewater systems. For example, EPA's more recent Real Water TA program that helps provide targeted assistance to help utilities meet NPDES permit requirements. Organization like RCAP or Great Lakes RCAP for the Great Lakes region offers free technical assistance as well to help you return to compliance. And a National Rural Water Association also has the Circuit Rider program that offers peer-to-peer on-site troubleshooting to help with compliance issues. And there are also funding opportunities out there. The Cooling Water State Resolving Fund, they do offer low-interest loans and principal forgiveness for water infrastructure projects to improve NPDES compliance. I believe you can use it to purchase equipment as well, like samplers, but you'll have to probably double check with that. There are also state SRF programs for Illinois. That's the Water Pollution Control Loan Program, which again provides principal forgiveness for projects that would improve NPDES compliance. And USDA also has a rural development or the Water and Waste Disposal Law and Grant Program, which is geared towards rural systems or smaller systems, which offers long-term loans and grants to help with returning back to compliance as well. But there are links to the bottom of these pages. Again, if you need TA, definitely check out some of these programs. So I know I'm getting running late, but I wanted to quickly go over some of those public accessible information, again, to help you better maintain compliance. So starting off, EPA has a bunch of resources, but these two I have on here. The first one is the NPDES Permit Writers course, and the second one is the Compliance Inspection Manual. They're geared more towards regulators, those that are writing the permits, but they do cover a lot of great information of how those permit requirements are set that can be useful for operators, especially if you have an operator that wants to learn more about the permit requirements. Do they want to be that go-to guy for knowing the NPDES law of requirements? Um, checking out these resources can be helpful to understand those technical information on how those permits are done. So the permit writer course, it's actually a bunch of video recordings from their popular 5-day course. That's again intended for permit writers to learn, the basic regulatory framework for permits and how to actually develop a wastewater discharge permit. And they have a lot of different chapters. Chapter 10, which is specifically on monitoring reporting requirements, which that outlines the uh, how to utilize system specific information like flow diagrams or their sampling results to develop monitoring requirements as well as deciding where they should be sampling from and how often they should be sampling. So if you're again interested in those permit requirements, how those permits are written, this is a great resource to check out. And the compliance inspection manual, those are used for the regulators that are doing routine inspections at those facilities, but it'll show you what kind of things that regulators are going to be looking for in terms of compliance. How their sampling processes, what their laboratory processes are, whether they're maintaining good record keeping, how accurate they're being with DMR reporting. So they do have a checklist that the regulators themselves use, but which can be also used to cross-reference your usual standard operating procedure to make sure that they're staying compliant with what the regulators are going to be looking for. EPA also has two shorter compliance fact sheets focused on helping system maintain compliance. So the first one is a 5-page guide on compliance tips for small and mechanical wastewater treatment plants, which serves as a short advisory to help small systems identify common causes of significant non-compliance issues with NPDES permits. So it highlights stuff like common NPD operational issues, equipment failures, industrial wastewater pass-through, all of that troubleshooting, and it provides troubleshooting steps with practical solutions as well. So if you just want a general overview of common compliance issues, more focused on the treatment side and how to return to non-compliance or return to compliance. This is a great short fact sheet that can be easily printed out, reviewed with your team, and make sure you're following the right procedures. EPA also has a 3-page, the small mechanical plants wastewater tip sheet, which is a shorter 3-page fact sheet that outlines the best practices for operating these mechanical treatment plants and how to avoid common issues that can lead to non-compliance. But this it serves as more of a checklist to make sure that you're doing your frequent and routine inspections, and it outlines those common process monitoring parameters and subsampling and reporting best practices, how those sections usually lead to compliance violation, and how to ensure that you're following the correct sampling and reporting processes. And something like this can also help develop your own standard operating procedures for those usual routine sampling, and doing your routine inspection, as well as making sure that your reporting and monitoring is compliant with is staying compliant. If you would rather have someone explain the requirements to you rather than reading a document, EFCN has 2 more recent webinar recordings that helps outline how to understand permit requirements and why certain parameters are monitored for. The first one is a 50-minute webinar recording from 2023 on NPDES permit regulations and discharge limitations, which gives a really great, clear, operator-focused overview of how NPDES permits actually work, covering things like how a permit should be structured, how to identify and understand your discharge limits, monitoring requirements, and all that other requirements. It does a great job at explaining those core compliance requirements, like what you're required to self-monitor for, how to complete a DMR, and reporting, meeting those reporting timelines on time, especially when it comes to non-compliance reporting. So it's also presented from an operator-focused perspective, so outlining how those permits are built from system-specific factors like flow rates, treatment processes that are existing treatment processes, as well as receiving water conditions, and how those translate directly into those permit requirements. It also includes tools like EPA. It highlights and introduces tools like EPA's ECHO database and explains how they can be used to review DMR data, as well as to kind of push operators to be like, the all this information is public information. So if you don't want your system's violations to be public information, you should work towards making sure that you're returning back to compliance. So it's a great webinar to again understand those NPDES permit requirements. Um, they also have another webinar that's an hour long, which explains which focuses more on those specific permit parameters that you're supposed to monitor for, and gives you a better understanding on how flow, pH, DO, TSS, and all those other parameters are enforced, um, why how they can affect system performance if they're elevated, how they can impact environmental health, and what the regulatory compliance is related to those parameters. And the speaker does connect how those parameters, when not met, can impact the environment, how it can increase oxygen level demand in receiving waters, how it can lead to algal blooms, and potential health risks from pathogens from the local public. It also helps explain how monitoring results do relate back to treatment performance. So how you can better interpret your data and understand what those numbers mean for your process control. Now focusing more on the sampling compliance focused resources. The first resource I have this slide is EPA's Guide on Procedures for Collecting Wastewater Samples. It's a 23-page guide that's more text-based, that lays out the standard methods for making sure samples are accurate and representative. It covers everything from selecting the correct sampling location, how to choose between grabbing composite samples or difference between those, how to properly handle, preserve, and document samples for lab analysis as well. It also emphasizes best practices like how to maintain chain of custody, using proper sample containers, and following holding times to avoid contaminating samples and ensuring data integrity and compliance. It also highlights some of those quality assurance steps like making sure equipment is clean, um, using field blanks, and properly setting up automatic samples to improve sample accuracy. So again, if you're looking for what EPA requires in terms of best practices for collecting samples, this is a great text-based resource. Alaska DEC also has a similar, more condensed fact sheet on wastewater sampling compliance, their guidance for wastewater sampling compliance, but it's a really useful operator-focused reference that outlines the key requirements for collecting and reporting specific parameters, from choosing like the correct sample location, um, following the proper holding times, chain of custody procedures as well. But it's very short, straightforward, and it works really well as a field reference. So this is something that you can print out, look at before heading out to sample, and make sure you're following the right steps for collecting samples for each of these parameters that you're required to. If you're looking more of a SOP for sampling, Georgia APD provides a 17-page guide that offers a more detailed step-by-step framework for developing a sampling plan. It outlines standardized field procedures, like selecting sample location, maintaining proper sample IDs, ensuring your data is fully traceable from collection all the way to reporting. It also focuses on making sure your data is legally defensible and emphasizing proper documentation, a consistent method, and representative sampling practices. So again, if you need a guide on process control sampling, like collecting samples from where within your aeration basin or return sludge you should sample from, um, which can help you evaluate your treatment performance, uh, not just non-compliance at the outfall. This guide or this sampling plan is pretty comprehensive in covering all that best sampling practices. But if you're looking more for a sampling guide, the second resource I have listed on here is from Pace Analytical. It's a presentation, but it provides a visual walkthrough of wastewater sampling fundamentals. So it covers topics like selecting representative sampling locations using images, understanding when to use grab or composite samples, so it highlights the different types of samplers, and how to properly complete chain of custody form with an example form shown on the presentation slide as well. So it does use visuals, a lot of real world examples for sampling equipment and methods, which can be more helpful compared to some of these text-based guides that might not necessarily have visual cues that can help you relate with your own system. So checking out both of these are great for developing a sampling plan. But if you want a more if you want to see an actual operator walking through their own plant, going through their sampling process, here are two YouTube videos from licensed operators that I thought were fairly informative. The first one is a 15-minute video from a licensed operator in California who walks through their day-to-day steps for wastewater sampling. Shows how to collect both 24-hour composite and automatic, or using automatic samplers as well as manual grab samples, and how to maintain documentation of compliance. The second video is a little bit longer, 25-minute long video, but it is from a licensed operator in Georgia who, again, they walk through their facility, highlighting best practices for collecting, grab, and composite samples, making sure that their sampler performance is maintained, prevent how to prevent cross contamination by using different equipment. At the influent alpha highlights all these great tips to make sure your sampling is compliant. So again, if you want a more operator focus walkthrough or sampling how they sample, these are two great YouTube videos to check out. And the second one, the operator himself actually offers his own sample checklist, like a pre-sample checklist and a post-sample checklist where you can list where to sample from, how much to sample, what to sample for. There's a Google Drive link on the bottom, but again, it's a great reference that you can print out and use yourself. Another useful sampling resource is EPA's 90-minute sampling do and don'ts webinar from 2021. It's a webinar recording, but it provides an overview of proper sampling techniques for NPDES compliance. Highlights field methods to follow. Making sure quality QA and QC processes to follow, like making sure they're collecting representative samples, using that they're not using improper containers or preservation methods. They're making sure that they're making proper temperature control and proper documentation and a lot more. So coming from EPA, it is more reliable, and it does highlight that don't do this, but do this kind of information. So it's a great recording. If you've never done sampling before, or if you're new to it, this might be, or if you have a new operator that's starting to sample, this might be a good reference to make sure that they're following the correct procedures. EPA also has a more recent webinar that's from 2 weeks ago on practical sampling and flow measurement tips for wastewater operators. So again, this is more operator focused, where it focuses on outlining practical real-world troubleshooting steps like performing tubing checks to troubleshoot for automatic composite samplers, how to properly calibrate pH meters, how to ensure probes or pH probes are calibrated properly, and how to track instrument drift from verifying your probes after field use. And it also explains concepts like time-based versus flow-based sampling, how to calculate those, and setting up a schedule for sampling, as well as predictive and reactive approaches. And he also walks through how sampling frequency and volume are calculated based on those flow conditions. So a lot of great information. If you're having to do flow-based sampling, or just want more information on practical sampling tips, another great webinar to check out. Sampling and monitoring is also an important part of wastewater systems that handle industrial treatment compliance requirements. So I did want to share two more resources that's kind of related to that, outlining best practices for industrial users. So the first one is a 40-minute presentation on from a pre-treatment conference out in the West, but it outlines um, be- best best practices for collecting grab or composite samples from industrial facilities, where to locate the industrial site's discharge location, and and it also outlines how some of those contaminants can impact those infrastructure, like how can hydrogen sulfide, low pH waste, or even fog can corrode and damage sewer lines, and grease interceptors over time. So for those that have to do pre-treatment, this is a great manual with visual images out from the field on how to properly sample. And EPA also has a more standardized manual, inspections and sampling manuals, that covers the same information, shows where to sample from, what to sample for, but it also includes a checklist, industrial user inspection checklist, as well as a sampling checklist that can help um, users follow right procedures or be guided on how to correctly sample from these industrial users. Now, quickly going over laboratory compliance resources, Illinois Water Environmental Association, they have a presentation on wastewater laboratory basics, covers a lot of those calculations required whenever you're sampling, QA/QC procedures, how to properly analyze parameters for BOD, TSS. But if you have a wastewater laboratory and you have to do the routine calculation, this is a great presentation because it's segmented. You can go to the BOD section, find out how to calculate BOD loading for same for TSS. It provides step-by-step procedures as well as QA/QC best practices. So a great resource for laboratory personnel. And Vermont DEC also has a more um, comprehensive 195-page manual on wastewater laboratory, again, highlighting how to sample, what the required best methods for sampling are, um, troubleshooting guide. So like if you're sampling for something and you're not getting the right reading or your sample looks a little bit different, you can reference these troubleshooting guides to see what might have caused that issue and how to properly mitigate those issues in the future. So another great laboratory reference. Um, and I know DMR compliance issues are the most reported issues. So here are several resources intended to help you improve the way you submit your DMRs. Pennsylvania DP has a 12-page guide on electronic and paper DMR reporting, which highlights, how to properly complete a discharge monitoring report. It's kind of formatted in a Q&A style. So, if you have a question on like how should statistical values be rounded for reporting purposes, the guide will give you example data as well as help you better understand those rounding methods. Alaska DC also has a 68-page net DMR guide, which provides a step-by-step walkthrough of how to completely submit a DMR through EPA's net DMR system. So, it actually walks you with images, how to set up an account through login.gov or CDX, how to assign user roles, how to gain access to permits, and how to actually enter and manage your DMR within the EPA portal. So again, if you're new to DMR, this is a great guide to check out to understand proper procedures. EP also has several resources to help you make sure that your DMR is compliant. They have a 4-page fact sheet on tips for submitting timely, accurate, and complete NPDES discharge monitoring reports. So this is again a short resource that you can print out, reference while you're working on your DMR, but it helps you understand common reporting errors like missing data, incorrect units, improper use of no data indicator codes. So again, if you're wanting to understand, make sure your DMR are appropriate, this document might be something that you might want to routinely check to make sure you're following the right procedure. And if you want a more webinar style resource, EP also has a 90-minute webinar that highlights common mistakes with DMRs, and and also which also walks through how to correctly calculate those compliance metrics and handle commonly reported challenges. So both of these are great for again refreshing yourself on proper or on common mistakes that can happen in DMRs. And finally, I also wanted to quickly touch on biosolid sampling requirements under Part 503. Especially relevant for those systems that produce biosolids. But the first one is a 12-page guide from Minnesota PCA, that's their state agency, which outlines detailed procedures for collecting wastewater solid samples for PFAS, specifically PFAS. So PFAS sampling isn't required in biosolids, isn't required federally, but I know a lot of states do require facilities that land apply to do some sort of monitoring. So if you need guidance on how to properly sample PFAS from biosolids, this is a great guide to check out. But for a more general guide, NUAPIC, this is the New England Interstate Water Pollution Control. Uh, they're a training provider and also a regulator out in the North New England area, but they have a 168-page guide on biosolid sampling plans, again, which provides a step-by-step approach for creating a sampling schedule, identifying sampling goals for biosolid sampling. It outlines, where they should be sampling from, how to properly collect and handle biosolid samples, and practical tools like sampling plan worksheets and SOP guides to help ensure facilities are collecting samples appropriately. So, and staying in compliance. But there are a lot more information out there that I couldn't cover today. But I'll go ahead and quickly demo our website to show you how you can search for similar information on our website. So again, our website URL is wateropera.org, and this is how the front page of the website looks like. There's no login or sign-in required. You could just get on the website and access all the tools that the website offers. Starting off, I'll highlight the resource library or documents library. But to get to that page, if you look at the menu on the top, you should see a resource library option. But if you hover your cursor over it, you should see a new window pop up with a lot more options to click from, but on the right side, search for documents. If you click on that, it will take you to our document library page. And this is how the page looks like. I did also include a link to the bottom on the bottom that you can click on. But once you get to this page, you should see this gray colored search module. There's three components to the search module that you can interact with. The first is the drop-down menu on the left side, which says select. This is where you can choose the main filters used to search for resources. And there's also a keyword filter text box on the right side where you can search for terms that aren't covered with the provided filters. And finally, there's the retrieve documents button on the bottom, where once pressed, it will actually run the search after the search criteria has been filled. So if you click on the select drop-down menu, you should see these four different filters that you can choose from. Once you select a specific filter, a new list will show up under it, which under the dropdown, which has sub-filters or more technical terms related to the individual filter. So the first filter is category, which are the 30 plus water and wastewater related categories, which I showed on the pie chart earlier. Once you select this as a category, as a filter, a new dropdown with the 30 plus categories which will be available for you to choose from. The second filter is type. So this can be used to search for a specific type of resource. So if you're looking to find a short fact sheet or a longer manual, you can choose that. Or if you're only looking for a video type resource, you can choose that under the resource type as well. The third is the state filter. So if you want to search for state-focused resource like case studies or reports from specific states or resources from specific state agencies that covers like regulations specific to the specific state, you can utilize this filter. And the last option is host, which is the organization that has developed or is hosting the resource. So if you want a resource from Illinois EPA, you can choose that as the host and find all the resources developed by them. Or if you want it from federal EPA, that is also another option. But once a filter is selected, you can click on the retrieve documents to populate the library. So let's say we wanted to search for sampling compliance resources. We can first try by using the category filter and selecting monitoring as the filter, since that's more related to sampling and monitoring, reporting. So if you select the category option under the select drop-down menu, you will see a new drop-down list under the original drop-down menu. So with the list of the water and wastewater focused topics as shown on the screenshot. But if you scroll through the list, you'll eventually be able to find monitoring as an option. And once you do, you can click on the category, which will highlight it in blue to show you that it has been selected. But then if you click on the retrieve documents button, you will see the results populate under the search module. And as you can tell in this screenshot, the search results have been populated. Right below the retrieve documents button, you will be able to see how many search records were found. In this example, it says over 2,600 search record results, which is way too much to go through. But so if we look back at the search module, you will now have access to a second drop-down option where you will be able to select an additional filter. So in this case, let's say we wanted to find resource from EPA specific, a monitoring resource from EPA specifically. In that case, we can add host as the second filter and select US EPA from the list to only show their resource. And then the screenshots already did it, but you can choose host. That'll give you a new drop down with all of the organizations that have monitoring related resources, US EPA being one of them. And if you click on it and click on retrieve documents again, that will update your search. And now we're down to 352 records, which is still a lot to go through. So we can either add a keyword filter here or add a third drop-down filter to narrow your search even more. But let's say we're looking for some of those sampling videos that we talked about today, in which case you can choose type as the next filter, add in video as the resource type, and click on retrieve documents again, which will refine your search down to just 44 search results, which is a much more navigatable, and you can start sifting through. But if you wanted to be even thorough from here, you can add a keyword filter like NPDES, BOD, or sampling frequency. Some of those those terms are related to NPDES monitoring or monitoring, sampling, and reporting, and you can try to narrow your search even more. But at 44, it's pretty easy to go through. It's only 4 pages, so you can start scrolling through the search results to figure out what might be a useful resource for you. But to figure out which might be useful for you, I do want to highlight that for every entry, again, we do include a title of the resource, which has the link embedded to the host organization website where the document is. We also provide a short summary again, how it's a useful resource, what's covered, what type of resource it is. So like in this summary, it says an hour and a 35-minute webinar. So you'll know this is a webinar. What kind of will provide instruction on when, where, and how to take measurement and sample wastewater in publicly owned treatment work. So again, you kind of get a general idea of what it's going to talk about. We also do include a link, the source link or the repository link, where we found the resource. So, if you're looking for similar EPA information, if you click on the repository link, you might be able to find a little bit more information aside from just the video itself. And again, we do link to the host organization's website as well, to credit them. Again, we're not trying to host anything ourselves. We're just essentially trying to link you back to the host organization's website. And if you click on the actual title, it should open a pop-up like this, which will show you the actual resource. For this, it opened directly to YouTube's page to pull up the video, but if it's a manual, if it's like a PDF document, that should automatically load the PDF. If it's like an Excel spreadsheet tool that you can download to record data, or a sheet to a Excel sheet that serves like a DMR, then that those kind of resources will automatically download as well. I do want to note that links can go dead. Oops, sorry about that. Can go dead. So if you come across a dead link, or you're really interested in that specific resource that you can't access anymore, definitely reach out to us, and we can try to help you find a copy or find a similar resource. I also mentioned that we do have a nationwide events calendar tool, which operators can use to search for training opportunities offering CEUs as well. So I did want to quickly go over that demonstration as well. So once again, this is our homepage. You can access the calendar page by selecting on the event calendar option on the menu at the top, as highlighted in the red box on this slide. Once you get to that event calendar page, you should see a search module similar to the document library tool, but with an empty calendar below. And on the left side of the search tool, you should see a drop-down option similar to the document library tool, which includes the 4 filters, the category. In this case, it'll be event type as opposed to resource type, and then the state and the sponsor, which is the organization sponsoring it. But there's also a keyword text box on the right side, and then there's going to be a blank calendar, empty calendar field on the bottom, which anytime you choose any of the filters or enter keyword, it will automatically populate the calendar. So again, if you click on the select drop-down menu, you'll see those 4 filters. Category, which again, the water and wastewater related topics. Type, in this case, would you be training types or event types? So are you looking for a training, in-person training, maybe an online webinar, or maybe a multi-day conference? You'll be able to choose that specific event type from that field. Or state, which is going to be the state where the event takes place in, or the state where the training credits are approved in, if available. And sponsor, which is the organization sponsoring the event. In general, we do find that most operators we hear from use just the state filter, since their priority is finding events approved within their states or events happening close to them. So definitely play around with some of these filters, choose one that best suits your need. But for this example, since we're based out of Illinois, let's see what events that are currently available or approved for Illinois licensed operators. So in this case, we want to go ahead and collect the state filter under the select drop-down menu, which will then give you a list of states to select from. And once you select Illinois from that list, the calendar will automatically populate with search results. So this screenshot is currently only showing the results in the month of July, but you can switch between different months by clicking on the next and previous month option looking on the side of the calendar module as well. But you can tell that some of the events have a full name, some of them has an acronym of an organization. Some of them are like, you can see the Illinois EPA, Illinois Section AWWA, or PTA. But just to reduce clutter, if there are more than 3 events per day, we do shorten the title to just the acronym of the organization. But if you hover your cursor over the name of the event or the acronym, it should give you the full list as well. But something like this, there's a lot. You can also add additional filters to narrow your search more, or if you know which specific day you're looking to do some training, you can start checking if there are training opportunities available on that specific date. So let's say you're an operator looking for training on wastewater monitoring. Since again, that's the topic for today, we can now add a second filter, category, and then choose monitoring, similar to how we did it in the documents resource library, to narrow our search even more. And if we do choose category and choose monitoring from that list, again, it'll automatically update that calendar search results, and we can see that it's drastically reduced it to just a couple or several training events to look from. And if we start looking through this list, um, you'll might notice some event names that might pique your interest. So this one that I have highlighted in red is from Professional Training Association or PTA, and it's an event on ammonia test methods. So if that's if your facility does ammonia testing and that's something that you're interested in, or you want to learn a little bit more about, this might be a training event that you might be interested in. I did also want to highlight that if you look on the right side of the search module, you will see that there is a view list option that will show all the events in a single window rather than in a calendar view. So I know some people hate switching between calendar views and just want all the trainings in a single window. This will be the list view is a great option to, again, find all of the training in the list. And in the list view, it doesn't do any kind of shortening to just the acronym. It does list the full name. It also gives you extra information, like if it's an in-person event, what city and what states the event takes place in. So in this screenshot, I have the blue arrow pointing at that ammonia test method training from PTA. So, let's say you wanted to learn a little bit more about this class. If you click on the name through the list view or the calendar view, you will see a pop-up with the full information about the event like this. So as you can tell, this window includes all the pertinent information about this event. It shows the dates and times at the top. The event info link will take you to the organization's websites webpage where you can actually get more information or register for the training event itself. And the more info link will usually include links to like an agenda for a conference, some other additional important links that it might be hard to navigate on the actual host organization's website. The details include information about the event, such as what topics are covered, what operators will learn. In this case, it'll cover analytical test methods for ammonia approved for wastewater compliance. So again, that fits the theme of today's webinar. And if you're interested if you're wanting to learn more about those ammonia test methods, this might be, again, a training event that you might want to check. And in that case, you would also want to know how much it costs and whether it offers CUs or not. Towards the bottom of the page, it does include that information, how much it costs, the fee, as well as how much CUs are offered. In this case, it says it offers wastewater CUs, assuming it's going to offer 3 hours worth of credits. And in which states they're approved in. And PTA does a lot of training around the country, so there will be a lot of states listed. But if it's a state-specific event, a training provider, you might just see Illinois listed on there, or or a specific state listed on there. But again, for PTA does training in Illinois, so again, if you're an Illinois wastewater operator, you need more training, this might be an training that you might want to check out. And if you wanted to search for online training specifically, you can do so by selecting the event type filter and choosing Webinar Live Online from the event list. Since COVID, there's been a lot more online training opportunities out there, self-paced, not self-paced or on-demand. We don't track those. We only track live trainings, but from webinars to online trainings, some organizations have started doing hybrid trainings as well, where people can register either in person or virtual. But if you were looking for those virtual opportunities, you can search for it using this filter. And just for if you do just that webinar live online as a filter, you will see bajillions of training opportunities on the calendar, and it's just going to make it impossible to see. So in this example, I added NPDES as the keyword just to see what kind of options might show up. But we do see a couple options showing up on here. The top one on July 1st, there's a training from, I believe that's Colorado. There's state primacy agencies. It looks like they're doing monitoring and operating for regular compliance training. CUAR is CU is Communities Unlimited. That's one of the RCAP regions. They're doing a training on wastewater system management training, which I'm assuming is going to cover something about NPDES permits since that keyword was tagged. But RCAP region trainings, they tend to be free a lot. So if you're looking for free training, that might be something that you might want to check out. And then if we look at on the 23rd, Virginia Water Environmental Association, they have a car wash effluent in the modern area, PFAS, and their impact on Virginia's wastewater systems. So again, that's, I'm assuming, covering how industrial wastewater from car wash facilities can impact wastewater stream. So again, if you're in a community where you're having an issue with all these a lot of newer car washes popping up and their discharge having an impact on your system, this might be a training that you might want to check out. So again, there are a lot of interesting trainings out there. Definitely check out our calendar. You'll find a lot of great training opportunities out there. And again, if you do have issues either finding training opportunities or specific resources, reach out to us. We'll help you find some trainings or resources that will fit your needs. And very quickly, I do want to feature the other information you can find on our website. We do have a blog post where we every month or routinely we try to post blog posts that cover recent events, highlighting recent newer documents that we've added in the past, focusing on different topics. But on the right side, I have a blog post from that's back in 2024, but it's a blog post on featuring EPA's webinar series on improving NPDES permit compliance. So again, if you're looking for EPA webinars, this might be something that you might want to check out. But if you want to stay up to date with industry news, our blog post is definitely worth checking out. We have a lot of great technical writers, science writers that help create this content. So definitely check it out and find great information on there. We also send out 3 newsletters regularly through our program, either monthly or biweekly, electronically. The first is our most popular standard wateroperator.org biweekly newsletter, which highlights some of the recent news like funding opportunities, upcoming free events, as well as some of the resources that we found in our library. We also have an Innovation for Small Systems newsletter, which is our monthly newsletter where we highlight recent news on innovations in water and wastewater management. So, stuff like those low-cost DIY style auto samplers, some of those more scientific reports on how they function, stuff like that, innovative stuff like that, we try to highlight in that newsletter. And we also have a monthly tribal newsletter, more focused on for operators of tribal systems, which highlights some of those news that are more tribal focused, some like news information like water rights, how to best help tribal systems, stuff like that, and funding opportunities. We try to focus in that newsletter as well. So if you have a lot of tribal, or if you're a tribal system operator, or you work with tribal systems, a newsletter like that might be something useful to stay up to date with those what's happening in the industry. And finally, I also wanted to touch on the self-paced class that we offer. We have a groundwater and well care class. I know it's more drinking water focused, but it's free, it's online, it's self-paced. It's our only class that we have approved in multiple states. It does offer credits to some wastewater license as well, but it focuses on how to maintain your groundwater well and how to protect your source water. But we also have 2 additional self-paced trainings, which we did off through MathDP in collaboration with University of Massachusetts Amherst, one on cybersecurity and one on source water protection. These are also free, but the source water protection training will only offer TCHs to Massachusetts operators, and the cybersecurity one is only approved in Massachusetts, New York, and I believe New Hampshire. But we've heard great reviews about our cybersecurity course. So just this morning, I think I read a news article about how Russia targeted a wastewater treatment plant in Canada, and it was affecting their chlorine chlorine feed. So, cybersecurity is a big thing that's going to get worse. So, keeping up to date with best practices, taking a course like this can help you understand those best practices. So I know I ran over a little bit, but that concludes my presentation. If you do get a chance to use our website and run into questions, again, feel free to reach out to me, Hideyuki Hiroshima, or to Steve Wilson, who is my supervisor and started the program. Both of our email addresses, phone number is on there as well. And again, if you need certificate information or you want to request this copy of the slides, please send in all that information to our info@wateropera.org email address. So at this time, I'd like to answer any questions if we have any. Caitlin, do we have any questions from the audience?
The biggest question was, will the slides be made available?
Okay, yeah, awesome. Yes, it won't be made available on our website, but if you request it to us, we'll be more than happy to send it to you. So please reach out to us at info@wateropera.org, and we'll send you the links, the copy of the slides, which will include all the links that we've covered today to the resource. But again, if you have any other concerns, if you have any questions, if you need more information related to compliance, sampling, monitor reporting, definitely reach out to us. We'll help you find either trainings or again documents that might fit your need. Or if it's super technical, we'll try to help you connect with either EPA or our RCAP technical TA providers, partners that might be able to help you answer some of those more technical questions. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. All right. Well, at that time, I'd like to go ahead and conclude this webinar. Thank you for your time, and I hope everyone has a nice rest of the day as well as 4th of July. So I'll catch. I thank you so much for attending this webinar.